Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Running a little late this evening, but I'm to be here with you. For the first time on this channel, I'm going to talk about Civil War. Dun dun dun. Thank you very much for joining me as we get into this. I'm stoked. I'm not sure if it's going to be what you think it's going to be. I was really excited to learn about this while I was listening to podcasts earlier today. I actually ended up writing about it for my Substack. So I figured we could get into the Substack because that kind of helps me organize my thoughts. I think what I'm going to start doing is publishing Substacks. When I publish them, I'm going to try to publish them at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you like, you're welcome to look for those. And then my Substack is just Lydia Leiterman at substack.com. I put the link in the description for you guys if you want to read along with me. I do have multiple sources over the course of my article, blog post, whatever you call it. In any case, I try to be as thorough as humanly possible. I used to do speech and debate, and when I was in debate, I was in policy debate, which means that we were very focused on the evidence. We're very interested in sources, and we really want to know where somebody's coming from and what they're basing stuff on. So, to preface this, this is from recent New York Times polling, and they use Siena. I'm not sure how Siena leans. I don't know exactly which way they like to go, but it doesn't really matter because I found this poll sufficiently fascinating to dismiss any kind of bias they have. And I suspect if they were left-leaning, these polls would have been a little bit different. Another thing to mention before I get into this is that one of my very first newly fledged was working in a phone center, which was terrible. I cannot recommend it at all, but it was kind of a weird form of blue-collar, white-collar work. I worked with a lot of convicted felons, people who couldn't find work anywhere else, and we would sit in these little cramped cubicles and make calls. It was so exciting. I think that one of the biggest takeaways from that was how incredibly biased all these polls are. So I was really glad that the New York Times /Siena gave us all of the questions that they asked people. So we will get into some of that for sure. Good to see people in the chat. I love people in my chat. All about chickens. What is going on with the chicken chat? I love it. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate my chickens. That was my very first job as a human being, was helping raise chickens. We had 50 chickens, and we bought food for them, and we cleaned their cage, and we kept them fed and watered, and we sold their eggs to people at our church in what I'm sure was a black market operation. Never thought about it that way. No one ever got sick. There were never any issues, but we were selling our chicken squeezings, and it was awesome. I remember feeling like a baller when I had like a bunch of money to invest. I remember I took all my money out of that business at one point. I don't remember why, but I remember I wanted to do something with that cash, so I pulled it out. My sister kept working on it, and then eventually she quit too, and we got rid of all the chickens. But we had chickens for probably 5 to 7 years, I think. It was a lot of fun. We would hatch them from their little eggs. We had a styrofoam hatcher. What is it called? Oh, an incubator, yeah. And we could watch them hatch. It was really fun. We were homeschooled too, so part of what we were doing was studying how they were growing and developing, and that was really awesome. So anyway, that's a slight sidetrack. Excuse me, I can't manage this chair apparently. Chair apparent? Alright, let's get into it. So I named my article, New New York Times /Siena polling is out, and you will be shocked if you expect a second Civil War anytime soon. So, let me preface this. I was listening to Ben Shapiro this morning when his line of monologue moved to recent public polling. And I will say that I used Grammarly on this one, so I don't expect any typos. But if I see any, I will be forthright about it. I was listening passively. I was busy with mundane household chores. But when I realized these polls were not about the upcoming midterms, I had to stop my moving box sorting, pause, and rewind to determine who had conducted these polls, because I was intrigued by the findings. Once I found the polls online, I focused in on 3 unique questions because they were each illuminating in their own ways. And they're all encouraging, surprisingly enough. Let me see if I can open this. I got my Mac and it's still really confusing to me sometimes. There we go, I did it. Oh, I'm very proud of myself. The first asks participants if they thought people's political views tell them whether someone is a good person, a lot, a little, or not at all. You'll never guess which opinion dominated. The largest number of people, 40%, said political views don't tell you a damn thing about whether someone is a good person. A smaller number, 34%, said it might tell you a little, and only 14% said politics tell you a lot about whether someone is good. Now, the New York Times/Siena poll info doesn't break it down by education level, race, ethnicity, etc., but I feel comfortable saying that the people who said that politics tell you a lot about whether someone is good are likely white, middle/upper class, and college educated. And I will add, I didn't put this in my article, but they're probably women. See the below graphic from graphics and breakdowns. And then we kind of look at the contrast between the strengths and weaknesses in party identification. And this is actually from a couple years ago, I think. Yeah, this is from 2018, 2019, but I don't believe that these numbers have vastly changed. And specifically what I'm thinking of is this Dem advantage between white college plus women and then millennial women. So we're terrible. Millennials are terrible. I'll be the first to admit it. Our whole generation is just kind of crappy for whatever reason. We were the spoiled snowflakes raised by the boomers. Let me bring this down a little bit. This should be maximized. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. I may be biased, but I think that college is the best place to go if you want to learn about oppression, discrimination, systemic injustice, and ensure all the things you hate about your fellow countrymen. At least that is the case in the liberal arts, hopefully not so much in STEM majors. And I truly believe that, because I've never seen such a concentration of people who really believe in systemic oppression and injustice and all that nonsense. It is crazy to me how they're feeding women, especially, these lies. Like, it's a serious problem. And this rolls right into feminism, and I'm going to get a little sidetracked here because feminism has been driving me crazy. Joe Biden. So this is something Steven Crowder talked about earlier today. You can tell I've been catching up on my podcasts. He talked about Joe Biden saying to that little girl, creepily sniffing her, and then saying, no serious men until you're at least 30. And Crowder really gets into it. He's like, if you are just looking for your partner when you're 30, you are way behind as a woman. And he's not wrong. I know that's true. If you have the opportunity to get married younger, you should. You should do what you can. But the problem is not that women are or aren't getting married younger. It's that feminism has told women that either they don't need men, they don't need marriage, they don't need children, or they can have it all. So one of those two choices, two choices. That's my toxic trait. I can't count on my fingers. I can't walk and talk. It's great. It's very exciting. They can only have one of those two options. You can either be married, be a mom, and work, or you can not have family, not be married, and only work. Those are the options. To me, that kind of looks like, I wouldn't blame it on capitalism. I would definitely blame it on materialism, because it's not the fault of capitalism that people have to work. And it's not the fault of capitalism either that you can work and earn money. I think that's a great thing. But I also think that women have been extremely deceived. And the other thing, I'm sure my noise is quiet. There we go. The other thing that I was reading an article. I wasn't listening to anybody on TikTok because I don't have TikTok on my phone at all. I was listening to I forget what he's called. It's like a financial guru. He's relatively young. He's made some interesting choices. People don't necessarily agree with him on his advice, but one of the things that he really emphasized was not going to know exactly what you want to do. And I was like, yes, 100%. Because I think one of the biggest problems we face, men and women, was that we were told that in order to get ahead in life, we absolutely have to go to college. And that is not the case. And I say this as someone who did not go to college. My husband did. He's doing great things. He also has an insane interest in what he went to college for. And he's also kept working his butt off on learning about those things ever since he graduated. So it's not static. He's kept up with it the whole time, which I think is awesome too. You really need to be in the state of mind where you're trying to develop what you understand about the world. And if college is the best way for you to do that, more power to you. But it's not necessarily going to be. So lies told to women, but that one is also told to men. So I digress on that point. The second question asks people whether they've recently had disagreements with family or friends about political issues that hurt their relationships. That's a good question. Again, good news. An overwhelming majority, 81%, said no. I do think this number would have been very different at the height of the push for vaccines, though. One of the only disagreements Mr. Sour Patch and I have ever had with family had to do with our vaccination status and whether it was smart not to get vaccinated. We were told in no uncertain terms that it was not, and that it was also very selfish to be unvaccinated, an idea I'd love to revisit now that it seems everyone except the recipients knew that the vaccines would not effectively halt the transmission of COVID. even as the pharmaceutical companies made absolutely incredible profits off their vaccine sales. And I know we're getting into kind of spicy territories, but recently, I forget that lady's last name, but the lady from Pfizer came out and she was like, well, we were working at the speed of science. I don't know if you guys are much familiar with science or what your field of study is, but science sometimes moves incredibly slowly. They were just trying to be super freaking fast. I totally get it. But they were saying that they never really tested whether or not the vaccination stopped the spread. I don't know about any of that. I'm just saying I'd love to revisit it. Anyway, again, another digression. I'm just getting all over the place tonight. Additionally, I believe most of my readers would fully accept that those on the right side of the aisle have more friends across party lines than those on the left. Even the ridiculously biased so-called news organization, The Washington Post, confirms this is the case. Editorialization is well earned, trust me, because I read this article that I'm referring to, and I think I used archived versions of everything so that you don't actually have to have a subscription. Let me see what I can do here. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. There we go. Yeah. Do I use archived versions? Yeah, okay, so I have the archived version of the top line results, which is the polling that we were looking at. And I think I also have this one, but maybe not. Huh, weird. Okay. For some reason that's not loading. I'll go back and check that link. Oh, here we go. Okay, yeah, that's archived too. So you guys, as much as I can help, you guys will never have to subscribe to someplace like the Washington Post or the New York Times. I will always do my dead best to make sure that they're archived and you can actually read what they have to say. That's one good way to get past paywalls, just so you know. A little secret for you. Use the archive.is. And this a Democrat trying really hard to maintain a friendship with some poor deluded soul who happened to be a Republican, and it's just so dismissive and disgusting. But they do admit that AEI research showed that Republicans are much more likely to have and maintain friendships across the aisle, which is very interesting, and you would think that that would cause a little bit of self-reflection on the part of the Washington Post, but definitely not. I'm just delighted that most people have not recently had dust-ups that hurt their relationships due to something as insubstantial as politics. In a recent video, I made the point that at your great aunt's deathbed, you will not be asking why she never came around to your views on social spending, because at the end of the day, or life, politics are as unimportant to real relationships as the weather. I do believe that from the bottom of my heart. That Aunt Helga won't go to heaven if she never sees the necessity of a value-added tax. It's not a religion. We don't need to treat it as a religion, and it appears that by and large people are not. We can all breathe a sigh of relief over that alone. So, are we going to have a civil war or not? That is a question. The third and most intriguing question asked was as follows, and I quote it verbatim. Which comes closest to your views, even if neither is exactly right? The government mainly works for the benefit of ordinary people. The government mainly works for the benefit of powerful elites, or don't know. So, guess which way people leaned? People said 68% of people agreed that the government mainly works to benefit powerful elites. So a coalition emerges. It turns out it's not us against each other. It might just need to be us against the government. And I'm not inciting any kind of anything. I'm just saying that if we want to see who is really trying to divide us, it's not one another. It might be professors, maybe to some degree. It might be Marxist ideologues among us, whatever. The fact that people think that the government mainly works to benefit powerful elites is mind-boggling, fascinating information to possess. Wouldn't you agree? I find that really, really kind of cool. Maybe that's why so many people tune in to like Timcast and other people like him. This one was truly motivating. Almost 70% of people believe the government works more for the benefit of an elite cabal of powerful people. Now they're speaking my language. I personally could not agree more, though I'm willing to bet that the response to this question is quite clear along party lines and changes with election cycles, which makes sense as we know that humans are both tribal and sometimes blindly trusting of their in-group. But it is refreshing to see that so many see the federal government for what it has become, an overbearing, politically motivated, clearly biased institution that can be trusted to give more priority to those who are already well off, or to those who are well connected and well protected by the mainstream media, like Hunter Biden. So I include an article from Just the News talking about how Biden's attempts to go after his political opponents are backfiring on him, and then this one about Hunter Biden and how much how much information the FBI exactly does have on him and the fact that they're not doing anything with it. So I think that this question is really, it feels like such a weight off my mind, because it seems to me, okay, so here's what I think might be happening. So I know it would be divided along party lines, but I suspect that right-leaning and independent people, actually independent people, are more likely to always say the government mainly works to benefit powerful elites, no matter who's in control. I think that if the Democrats weren't in power, I suspect that this number of people who agree with that question's answer would be even higher. So I would really like to see them repeat this maybe after the midterms or after, a Republican president is voted into office, because I guarantee you that more and more Democrats would say the government mainly works to benefit powerful elites. Because if it were not their preferred party in power, they wouldn't be so quick to say, it mainly works for the benefit of ordinary people. I have to say, this was unity that I did not expect. I kind of wish that Ben Shapiro had gotten into this in the course of his podcast, but if he won't, I sure will. So today's article and tonight's video will get more current eventsy than I usually try to make it, but I think more people must know that the people who live down the block from them are not their enemies, and do not view them as such because of their politics, for the most part. For too long, I think right-wing pundits have pushed the idea of looming civil unrest without offering solutions. That's entirely my reasoning behind starting my channel, that and trying to get women more involved in what's going on in current events and culture. I got plenty of pushback for announcing that the Sour Patches have moved to a blue city. Fine, fair enough. I don't feel a driving need to prove anything, but I will say it's important to recognize that all is not lost, that we will not be fighting our neighbors in the streets, even with the division of Roe on the table, and that the time is coming when we can all agree that the government is the real source of our disagreements and something that must be fixed together. There you go. That's a much more peaceful way of saying that. I needed to be a little more tactful. Frankly, that made my day, and hopefully you are similarly encouraged. So I thought that was really neat. I just wanted to share that with you guys. I think that that's something that people haven't really taken into account. I think when we talk about civil war, we are discussing the things that the government is doing, not the things that our neighbors are doing. And I think that Bill Maher, is it Bill Maher or what's the other Bill? There's another Bill. There's the comedian. Why can't I remember his last name? You guys tell me in the chat. The other Bill, he was talking about how he doesn't think there's going to be a civil war. He's like, you just go outside and look around and there's no way it's going to happen. And I remember that was greeted with a great deal of skepticism by the folks at Timcast, because it was like, well, that's not exactly what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself what a Bill Burr, there you go. You have to ask yourself what exactly a civil war would look like. Because if you're not going to battle with your neighbors, who are you going to battle with? Is it something that we could all join hands on and try to figure out together? And if enough people do decide to join forces, they would have to listen to us? Yes? No? Am I crazy? Might be a little bit optimistic, but reading these poll results were really interesting. I wanted to break it down further. I need to see if they actually did get into that. But I think this is just from the other day, so this is super recent. I don't know. I also thought the Republicans having more friends across the aisle than Democrats was really illuminating as well, because that doesn't surprise me in the least. And just like being conservative is good for your brain, I think that it's also good for your sense of humanity, because it makes you more open to being friends you disagree with. Now, one of the things that somebody brought up to me was the concept of being pro-life and getting along with people who aren't pro-life. And I wanted to address this on my video instead of on Twitter, because Twitter isn't the best medium for something as involved as that kind of conversation. Twitter's a microblog, which is great for some things. It's great for summarizing your ideas neatly. But I wanted to say, I mentioned it last night, and I'll say it again tonight, but it's true. People do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. It's true. And this is why I made the case in August. This is something that, this is something Scott Adams mentioned just, I want to say yesterday or the day before, that feelings do care about feelings. They necessarily must. Those facts don't care enough to look at them in the first place. Let me get rid of this lovely bot. Go away. Bye. Let me be simpler. goodbye. Okay, cool. Yeah. You know you've made it if you're starting to get those bots in the chat. It's very exciting. What I wanted to say was that in order to make any inroads in a conversation about being pro-life, you first have to demonstrate to people that you care about people in general. Because one of their first arguments is that you care about people until they're born, and you could care less about what happens to them and all that jazz. You know how arguments, we know how it is. But I think that in order to convince people that you are correct, you have to be willing to listen to them. You have to care about what they say. And in order to get them to care about what you need to demonstrate that you give their ideas credence as well. And I think that is a way that we can look at it that'll make it a little less contentious. Because if you believe that abortion is truly this huge sin and you have a really hard time living with it, I think that you have to carefully tread the way you convince people or the way you talk to people, because if you intend to make a positive difference in the world, you need to understand human nature. And you need to know that you can't just pounce on people, and you can't tell them they are wrong and expect them to deal with it. That is not how humans work. So you will have a hard time persuading people of your rightness if you can't even convince them that you care what they say at all. Have you ever tried to talk to somebody who doesn't care what you think at all? It's almost impossible, and I honestly can't recommend it. I think that I don't think that you should be engaging with people you disagree with until you fully understand where they're coming from. And I think that that's a good rule of thumb. I do believe that every single child should do some form of speech and debate. I think you should do some kind of persuasive speaking. I did impromptu speaking in high school, and I'm clearly not all that great at it. I've been out of practice for a while, and I've never been like on the camera like I am right now. So it's kind of hard for me. I'm just going to ramble. I think that teaching people how to back up their own ideas is really where we can get a win in the culture war, because that is real. Civil war, maybe. Culture war, yes, definitely, 100%. Somebody says ignore people. You just can't, even if you don't like people. Audio keeps looping. Interesting. I wonder why. I'm using my little microphone here. Should be fine. Make sure we're good. Yeah, looks fine to me. Apparently I am going through a time vortex. Sorry guys, that sucks. Oh, I'll have to talk to my tech support after this. Oh well, we'll figure it out. Anyway, you do have to care what people think. You have to care whether you can persuade people, because if you don't, you can't just live on a mountainside. You have to interact with people on some level or another, whether it's just going to the store to buy stuff or actually engaging with people to make your business work. And you need to kind of know how they tick. The fact of the matter is you're doing a lot of emotional management for other people, which kind of sucks. Probably bandwidth related on YouTube side. Interesting. I know I have good internet here. I've never had an issue with the audio before, but I bet you a nickel that my husband knows exactly what's wrong and can help me fix it after the fact. So we'll see what he has to say. Anyway, I probably will wrap it up here though. I didn't read the chat as much as I wanted to. I just wanted to say that when it comes to serious issues like abortion, stuff that you care really deeply about, more than anything, you need to try to figure out how to persuade people and come at it not just from a facts and logic position, but from persuasion, not feelings. I won't say feelings. It is very much a case of persuasion, which is both facts and logic and feelings. And I'm starting to sound like Scott Adams, whom I admire and appreciate, but I'm not exactly in his boat, because I think that, I don't know if you can hear the cars outside. It's very exciting. If you guys don't listen to Scott Adams, I would really recommend it. I feel like he expands my brain a little bit. I don't agree with him on everything, but I know he's a very smart man. And he looks at the world through such an interesting lens of persuasion as an artist, as a business owner, as like this entrepreneur. Lydia is in fact taller than Tim Pool. I think we're the same height. I'm 5'10". I think Tim is too. I am not doing the Timcast show anymore. Cyril. We moved to be closer to family, so we moved to a blue city, which is bitty. Guys, you know what? Today I met some new people out. Guess what? They're fantastic. And we didn't talk about politics at all. And I was just reminded of this poll, and I was like, you know what? I would believe that most people think that people can't be judged whether they're good or bad based on their politics. Because it just doesn't do that. And I think most people intuitively know that. So, hopefully I can leave you guys with that little bit of encouragement. I'm very sorry about my audio. If it was giving you a hard time, you can try refreshing the page too, or listen back after I'm done. Otherwise, and then I think tomorrow, oh yeah, I had something I really wanted to get into. There was a lady who had a surgery all booked out, and then she was shot down, or she was turned down by the hospital because she specifically requested something by gender. I guess she had a history of assault, and she requested no males, and they told her that they weren't willing to take care of her because they only wanted to have an inclusive environment or something to that effect. I'm going to look into it. That might be what I talk about tomorrow. It might not be. You guys are welcome to send me your ideas over on Twitter or in the comment sections. I really appreciate your feedback. I really love my audience. It's really fun to engage with you guys. YouTube delayed my notification for the stream. That's rude. I don't like that. That sucks. Anarchy is no guarantee that some people won't kill, injure, kidnap, defraud, or steal from others. Government is a guarantee that some will. Yeah, so anarchy. I think that Andy and I should talk about anarchy some Saturday morning, because I don't know if you guys know this, but he actually is an anarchist. But that strikes me as a little bit idealistic too. I would really like to believe that everybody could get along just fine without any kind of structured government, but people, and I think that they need some kind of structure. Now, admittedly, the state is not wonderful. I don't think they always make the right choices by any means, but I just don't know what else we should do. To be fair, you can't just look at something and be like, well, we've never had anything different, therefore we have to stick with the way things are. That's kind of silly. But as we learned in speech and debate, specifically policy debate, if you a new change, then you have the burden of proof. You need to explain why exactly we need to make that change. Now, with the government, there are plenty of reasons we can make that change, and I think that's a fair analysis. So I definitely think that Andy and I should talk about that at some point in the future. All right, I'm going to wrap it here. Thank you guys all for joining me this evening. I will see you all tomorrow night. Let me know what you think I should talk about in the comments or over on Twitter at Sarah Petchlids. I need to start pitching this every single stream. So I have lydialeiterman.substack.com, which is where you can go to read this article that I talked about. All the sources are over there. I also have sarahpatchlids.me, which is where all my socials are in one neatly condensed package. And I think I have every most recent video on there. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if it auto updates or if Andy has to go in and do that. That seems like a pain. He shouldn't have to keep up on that. He's a pretty busy guy. But in any case, I will see you all tomorrow. Until then, bye guys.